Paramakaruna, the most merciful Lordship, Shri Gauranitai ki, Sri Jagannath, Sri Baladev, Shrimati Shubhadra Maharani ki, Sri Harinam Sankirtan Jagya ki, Itai Gaura Premanandi. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to the assembled devotees. Oh, glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Wanna sing, bro?
Namaste Narasimhaya. Prahlad Ahlad Daine. Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha. शिलातंकान खालाए शिलातंका इतो नरसिम्हा परतो नरसिम्हो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिम्हो यतो बाहिर नरसिम्हा हृदय नरसिम्हो नरसिंहमादिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव कर कमल वरे नखाम अद्भुत श्रृंगार दलित हिरण्यकशिपुर तानु भृंगा केशवधृता नर हरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तब कर कमल वरे नखाम अद्भुत श्रृंगार दलित हिरण्यकशिपु तानु भृंगा केशवधृता नर हरि रूपा केशवधृता नर हरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जय केशवधृता नर हरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद भक्त प्रहलाद भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय किशोर किशोरी जय किशोर किशोरी किशोर किशोरी जय किशोर किशोरी जय जय जगन्नाथ जय जगन्नाथ जगन्नाथ जय जगन्नाथ जय जगन्नाथ जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवा जय सुभद्रा जय गौरानिताय जय गौरानिताय गौरानिताय जय गौरानिताय जय गौरानिताय जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 श्री श्री नरसिंह भगवान की जय, प्रहलाद महाराज की जय, गौर प्रेमानंदी हरि हरि बोल।
So if we can all sort of rearrange ourselves at this side of the room, that'd be great. And those who can sit on the floor, come closer, just so that there's not like a ocean between us and Yogeshwar Prabhu. So on behalf of all the devotees at Kishore Kishori's house, ISKCON Chicago, I am very, very honored to welcome His Grace Yogeshwar Prabhu. Yogeshwar Prabhu, the disciple of Srila Prabhupada, living in the New York area. And we were just talking earlier that he has some very amazing and fond memories of being with Srila Prabhupada. I was telling him that I've never met him before, but it's like we always knew each other, and he was expressing that this is my family and I'm here to be with my family. And I said, I remember seeing you in that video with Srila Prabhupada in Paris. The only things that's changed is hair is grey. Nothing else hasn't changed. He still has the same youthful smile and youthful exuberance about him. So I'm very, very happy and grateful that he's here. He's also written 2 books, at least 2 that I'm aware. He's written more books, I'm sure. One is the biography of George Harrison, and he gifted me a copy. And another book is in print. It's coming out soon, about how Krishna consciousness started in the West. And so Prabhu, being a devotee, he also is a speaker on criminal justice, especially related to war. He writes books and speaks about the Holocaust. He's here in Chicago because today he was speaking to the Illinois Bar Association on this and other topics. So, and he's here to speak to us about strengthening the cooperative spirit. So thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Welcome.
Thank you. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavali Paschati Desha Tarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakti Vrindam Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. How you doing? Nice to meet you all. That's it. That's our show. Good night. I turned 65 this year, so my mental health isn't all that good. I tend to be a little silly sometimes. It's an honor to be here, to speak with you all. I asked to come, actually. I knew I was going to be speaking this evening at the Sheraton Hotel. I said, if I don't get to the Chicago temple, then my life is useless. So at least let me try to come. And then they kindly invited me to speak with you this evening, and talk together for a little while. So it's great because this is like, discovering family members you never knew you had. That's really wonderful. So, I was asked to speak on the topic of strengthening cooperation, which is really just an excuse for telling a lot of cool Prabhupada stories, I think, basically. All right, so a little background. Normally I'd go around the room and ask each of you your name and your personal history, but by the time we got over here, it would be next Tuesday, so we won't be able to do that today, so I apologize. I'll hope to get to know you all on another occasion. But by way of introducing myself, supplement a little bit to what Nityananda Prabhu was saying. I joined in London in 1969. So my big claim to fame is that's me chanting on the Radha Krishna Temple album. Samsara Dava. Never mind the degrees in law, crimes, war, and religious studies. Oh, you knew George Harrison. They just want to know about George. Beatles stories. That's what people want, Beatles stories. So, but it was an exciting time to join Krishna consciousness. The way it happened was that I was on a Christmas break from the Sorbonne. I was a student in Paris. And I met a devotee there, Umapati, Wali, called him Wali. And he said, you should go to London, our spiritual master's there. And I hesitated because Wali had a shaved head. So I figured, if I get too much into this, I might end up looking like him. So I don't know. But then I couldn't resist, and I finally went to London. And Prabhupada had left just the day before. So, first lesson for you is, if you have a chance to do some devotional service and to be with your spiritual master, take it right away. Don't miss the opportunity, because you might have to wait a long time. And they're getting to talk with me, and so what do you do? I'm in college, and what else? Well, I play organ in a college band. Really, you play organ? Come with us. So that we piled into a Volkswagen minibus. Is anybody old enough here to remember the Volkswagen minibus? Probably the most dangerous vehicle ever invented, right? Death, you took your life in your hands riding this thing. So we're rocking back and forth. So I said, where are we going? And Tamal Krishna, later Tamal Krishna Maharaj, says, congratulations, you're in Krishna's band now. I don't know what that meant. So we show up about 15 minutes later, and the van door opens, and I'm looking out, and there's a door with a number 3 on it. And I say, 3 Savile Row. Oh my God, this is Beatles headquarters. Now you have to bear in mind, this is 1969. The Beatles were still together, right? They were in private, they were breaking up, but nobody knew it then. The Beatles were like, if Shukadev Goswami, Narada Muni, Maharaj Parikshit, and Vyasadeva had gotten together to form a band, that was like the Beatles back then. It was like anything they said was, Shastra. So I'm saying, what is going on? So we walk in, and sure enough, there's the big green apple on the wall, and then we walk downstairs, And there's George Harrison standing there, skinny like a string bean, like this. But he's got a Prabhupada badge on and a Krishna badge. He's wearing his neck beads, And he goes over and he hugs Shyam Sundar and he hugs Mukunda and everybody. And I say, what is this? So then they say something to him and they point to me. So he walks over and hands me a harmonium. And he says, can you play that? Okay. So that day we were recording Yamuna singing Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya. She has that kind of nasally sound. So I'm pumping away on this thing. We're jamming. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, let me get this straight. If I stay with these people, I get God and the Beatles. I'm in. That was pretty much it. So I lived in temples for 13 years. I came out on October 28th, 1982. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, to be precise. And got on a plane and came back to New York. I'm from New York. I'm a New Yorker. But during those 13 years, and all of this is just meant to impress you, you understand, I served as president of the Philadelphia Temple, the Paris Temple. I was head of the French BBT. I was an editor on Back to Godhead magazine. I started Bala Books, doing children's books. Published Yamuna's book, Lord Krishna's Cuisine. What else? I don't know. Then when I came back to New York, I went back to school, got my degrees, went into religious studies, primarily in the Holocaust era, very dark time. And currently I serve on the Mayapur Temple Committee for exhibits. I'm on the ISKCON Resolve mediation team. And what else do I do? I don't know, this and that. So I tried to stay busy. And I lecture. I do books and some documentary films, and I lecture. So it's a full life. It's a very full life. And by Prabhupada's grace, I get to have the company of wonderful devotees like you, which is the best part of all. I have a son who's 36 years old. He's initiated by Radhanath Swami. His name is Namamrita. He lives with his family in Alachua, and he's a pilot for Southwest Airlines. I have a daughter who is 26 years old. She's doing her PhD in philosophy. The big money path, philosophy. My wife runs a jewelry store back in New York. So now you know everything. That's about it. And the best part, though, of having been a devotee for almost a half century now, and you start thinking in terms of half centuries, that's something, was having been a part of that early generation. There's some amazing, amazing devotees. I mean, those people in London, I had no idea what the philosophy was. All I knew is these people, I want them in my life. They were so wonderful. Jamuna and Gurdas and Shamsundar and Malati and Mukunda and Janaki, Tamal Krishna. That was a special time, wonderful time. And so I know I'm here today because of the love and the affection that I got from those devotees. I know that. And, when we talk about cooperation, there's only two reasons for me to cooperate with you. Either I'm getting something out of it, materially, or else I love you so much that my greatest joy is to cooperate with you. So, I don't know whether you've picked up on this yet, but we don't pay people salaries. So there's not a whole lot of material, So what's left? We have to learn to love each other, right? And I'm going to go down to visit my son and his family in Alachua in a couple of weeks, and they've asked me to speak on the difference between the first generation and the future generations. Well, that's a big topic. I think one of the biggest differences is that we made the mistake in the first generation of being more preoccupied with being good devotees than being good human beings. We were so caught up in the mission that we forgot that we're personalists. Now, this is a word we bandy this about, we're personalists in devotional life, right? And yet we don't seem to really know what that means. We don't understand what that means very well. What does it mean that we're personalists? It means that I'm willing to trust you more than I would somebody else. Because we're family and because we're all doing our best to serve Krishna. So even if it is uncomfortable, I will trust you with the same kind of respect and dignity and confidence that I would want you to accord to me. This is a very difficult thing to achieve. Most people, I think it was Marianne Robinson, who's President Obama's favorite poet, said that nobody actually knows anybody else ever. Her idea was that we inhabit our own universes. And even someone you've known for a very long time, a family member, a husband, a wife, there's a part of you that's reserved, that the other person never completely knows. It's knowing that and still being willing to confide and to open up and allow yourself to be vulnerable to someone else that characterizes devotional sangha, the company of devotees. When you think about people in the spiritual world, what's the difference? What's the difference? If we were in the spiritual world, what would we see there? What would life be like there? What's it like to be a liberated soul, and living among other liberated souls? What's that world like? And we read about it in the Bhagavatam, we read about it in Krishna book, and what's it really like there? Well, my guess is that in some respects it might look like the world we know. I mean, people aren't just sitting around in ecstasy all day long, waiting for something to fall on their head. I mean, they have their families, they have their services that they're doing, and they're taking care of business and raising their families, all these things are going on in the spiritual world. So what's the difference? They have emotions. We go through emotions, they go through emotions. Sometimes they're laughing, sometimes they're crying, sometimes they're feeling bereft, sometimes they're feeling uncertain. I mean, all these emotions are there. The difference is that in the spiritual world, nobody thinks they're going to die. That's a big difference. Here, and this is all happening kind of subconsciously, we're afraid of our own vulnerability because we're mortal. We know we can die. So our concern is that this other person can hurt me. So if someone's going to hurt you, what do? You get defensive. This is pop psychology 101. If you've had any psych classes, you've heard this stuff. So, Freud's idea was that the erotic impulse, the sexual impulse, is actually a desire to go back to the womb where it's safe, to be in a safe place. That's a whole other class about how it is that actually sex is a desire to avoid death, but we're not going to get into that. If you're interested in that subject, I recommend a book by author Ernest Becker called Love and Death. But here, because we know we're mortal, that other people could hurt us, from our very earliest days as children, we build up these defenses. For a child, everything's big. Have you noticed that? Everything is huge. Everything is a danger. Everything is a threat to a little child. Right? So if you're lucky, early in life you have parents who know how to encourage you, how to help you overcome your fear of your own mortality. Unfortunately, parents today themselves, for the most part, are very confused. They don't understand their own spiritual identity, and therefore their children grow up uncertain. And that leads to all what we call the human condition, right? The human condition, where we're overburdened by tensions and stresses and anxieties and fears that other people will come in and hurt us. Yeah. The human condition essentially means that you're an eternal soul, but you're stuck inside this vulnerable material body. And that generates fear of being hurt. This body is not invulnerable. It may rebound from disease or whatever, but it's still very fragile. Krishna consciousness, what Prabhupada brought, this is kind of drilling right down to the bottom line. What Prabhupada brought to the West is this understanding that you're not your body. It's lesson 101, and yet we don't always get it. We don't always get this very first lesson. Because if you actually understood that you're not your body, that fear of mortality, of death, of being hurt, would dissipate. If you're feeling fearful of the world, you haven't yet understood this first lesson that you're not your body. So let's look at this for a minute. Just from pardon this word, from an ontological level. If you are an individual now, it means that you're an individual eternally. Why is that? Because by definition, spirit is indestructible. This is second chapter Bhagavad Gita. Right? The soul can nahanyate hanyamani sharira. The soul is neither born nor dies. It's indestructible, cannot be withered by the wind, moistened by water, burned by fire. It is eternally the same. All right. So, from this perspective, you are beautiful. You're perfect. You lack for nothing. If you just realized that nature of the soul, you'd have a lot more self-confidence. The beauty of Prabhupada's teachings and books is that for the first time, at least in Western history, we had a clear understanding that we're persons not just now, but eternally. You're not just a person inside this body. The soul is by nature an individual, Satchidananda Vigraha. How is that? Because it cannot be that at some point in cosmic time, this one nondescript, irreducible Brahman, all-pervading energy got cut up into little pieces and distributed around creation as individual beings, and that at some point in the future, when we come to the fulfillment of our spiritual practice, that we get crazy glued back, onto this, Brahman cloud. If you're an individual now, you have to be an individual eternally. That's the nature of spirit, of Atma. So from, if you will, an ontological level, you are an eternal person. And no one can take that from you. Knowing that you are invincible, immortal, complete, you lack nothing, what's there to be afraid of? So it begins with this point of philosophy. And if I'm not fearful of dying because I know my own true nature, then I have no reason not to come before you and be completely open and completely vulnerable. Because I know you can't do anything. There was a phenomenal, one of the lectures that I give is on, it's called Yoga and the Holocaust. It's about 3 people who were raised in faith traditions who died during the Nazi era. The first one is a Christian theologian named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer was a very distinguished theologian and minister. He taught in New York during the early 1930s at the Union Theological Seminary, and then decided that as a Christian, he had to be back in Germany with his people during this troubled time of Hitler and the Nazi era. So he took the last boat back to Germany in the late 30s, and he joined the conspiracy to assassinate Adolf Hitler. As a Christian, as a priest, he did this. And unfortunately, he was betrayed by someone who had infiltrated the group, and he was sent to concentration camp Flossenburg, I believe, and was hanged. When the guards came to fetch him to be hanged, this was April of 1945, there were two guards, he looked at them and he said, "For you, you think this is the end. For me, it's just the beginning." And he had such a smile on his face as they hanged him, because he knew, I'm not this body. The second person we talk about is Rabbi Kalman Shapiro, who was the chief rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto. Now in Warsaw, Poland, the Nazis had cordoned off this part of the city with brick walls and barbed wire, and all the Jews were made to live there. And Rabbi Shapiro, wrote books and kept an underground temple group going. It was illegal, but he had that group going. And the books that he wrote, it's just extraordinary, because he hardly even makes mention of the horrors going on around him. He talks like someone giving Bhagavatam class. Make sure you stay very clean, keep good company, chant your rounds every day, of course they say your prayers every day. He was interested in building community, and that was the name of the book that was found hidden in the walls of the Warsaw Ghetto after the war ended. They found the manuscript for this book. It was published first in Israel. There was a note saying, "If this is found, please send it to my relatives in Israel, in Palestine at the time." So it was first published in Hebrew, and then maybe 15 years ago, it was translated into English, called Building Community, Kalman Shapiro. The third person we talk about, this will blow your mind, was a Sufi princess. Her name was Nur Inayat Khan. Now, Nur Inayat Khan was one of 4 children born to Hazrat Inayat Khan, who was a Sufi mystic, big, tall South Indian Sufi, who was the grandson of Tipu Sultan. Now, those of you who know something about Indian history know that the lion sultan, tiger sultan, was the last holdout against the British. He fought them personally. So from this very distinguished lineage came this tall, mystic, dark-skinned Inayat Khan, who married the cousin of the founder of Christian Science out of Albuquerque. So beautiful, blonde-haired young woman marries this tall, handsome Sufi mystic, and from that union came these 4 children, all of them musically very gifted, very bright. And when the war broke out, their father and his family were in France, where he had students, and they had to leave because the Germans were bombing. So they took the last boat to England. And in England, they had this conversation. They said, well, what can we do to support the war effort? We can't just do nothing. But as Sufis, they were pacifists, so they couldn't raise a gun. So the brother, Pir Vilayat Khan, became a pilot for the British Air Force. His younger sister, Nur Inayat Khan, became the most gifted radio operator for the Bletchley Park crowd. Now, if you don't know what Bletchley Park is, it's like 007 land. It's where the British trained all of their underground agents and their code breakers. You've heard of the Enigma code, this machine that couldn't, just baffled people's minds. It was the Bletchley Park group that broke the Enigma code machine that allowed them then to essentially win the war by outsmarting the Germans. And Noor Inayat Khan was dropped under cover of night into Nazi-occupied France, where she joined the French underground and sent out signals with her radio that misled the Germans away from the Normandy beach landing. So she's credited with having actually facilitated the end of World War II, basically. Unfortunately, she was also betrayed by an operative of the SS who penetrated the French underground. She was arrested, brought to Avenue Foch, which is like the Fifth Avenue of Paris, where the SS had their headquarters. When I was in Paris as a devotee, our temple was about 5 doors down from this building that was the SS headquarters in the 1940s. She was tortured and then sent to concentration camp in Dachau. In Dachau, she was tortured again, then staked out on the ground and shot with a Luger bullet to the back of her head. Her brother, Pir Vilayat Khan, was someone I got to interview in 2000 at the United Nations. There was a gathering of religious and spiritual leaders there, and my job was to interview these people on camera, and I pretty much got to ask them anything I wanted, which is really cool. So we're introducing ourselves as the camera guys are getting ready, and Pir Vilayat Khan, head of the Sufi order, asking me, so tell me about yourself, what are you doing? I say, well, right now I'm writing a book about the war crimes trials that took place after World War II on the grounds of concentration camp Dachau. And he started to cry. I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. He said, no, there's no way you could have known that my sister was killed there. And he told me this story about his sister. I said, did you find out anything else about her time in Dachau? He said, yes, I went there after the war, trying to find some information. And I met one of the young women who was also tortured in the same room with her, and she survived. And she told me that my sister, now what you have to understand is when they were raised, they were reading the Bhagavad Gita and hearing the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata. The Sufis are part of that tradition. Pir Vilayat Khan said that his sister turned to her torturer and said, you can do whatever you want to my body. You can't touch my soul. Now, she was a very beautiful woman, and apparently she kind of turned her torture a little bit, because there was a biography of Noor written in the early 60s, I think. And the author of this biography went and found the German who had been her torturer. After World War II, a lot of these Nazis were let go. They were called denazified. They paid a fine and sent on their merry way. So she managed to find him, and he said, what happened to her? What happened? And the biographer said, well, she was killed in Dachau. And he started to cry. And he said, why didn't she, this was the guy who tortured her on Avenue Foch in Paris. He said, why didn't she just tell me what we wanted to know, namely, where's the rest of your underground group? I could have saved her life. So obviously he had developed some affection for her. Anyway, the point being that we here this evening, we're part of that very privileged, small community of people throughout history who have been given the opportunity to understand that we are not the body. We're the eternal soul, the individual being inhabiting this body. And that's empowering. If these people could find peace being tortured by Nazi monsters, can we not find a way to cooperate with our less dramatic lives? So now we get to the question of what does it mean to cooperate? What does that look like practically? What does it mean? What do you do? Well, for one thing, it means you learn to listen. You learn to shut your mouth and just listen. Probably the greatest gift you can ever give anybody is just listen to them. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to comment. You don't have to judge. You don't have to solve the problem. Just listen. People working in therapy, psychoanalysis, understand this. They understand that what a great gift it is. So many people don't want to think that they mean nothing, that they're irrelevant. They want to know that somebody cares about them. And yet it's the one thing that's in shortest supply, is some validation for people that their life is meaningful, because no one's ready to listen to them. So the first step on the road to cooperation is a willingness to sit and listen without judging. Just listen. You learn this in mediation. When I took my training for ISKCON Resolve, which is our official mediation group, you learn just listen. You know, whatever they have to say. Don't get into their story. Don't get entangled in whatever they're going through. Just listen to them. And acknowledge them. Acknowledge that must have been very difficult for you, or whatever is appropriate in that moment. So the first thing is just to be willing to acknowledge someone is alive by listening to what they have to say. The second thing is, and this is harder, to listen, all you got to do is shut up. The next step is you have to be willing to accept that maybe they're right and you're wrong. Oh my Krishna. See, we come at this with a lot of strident conviction and certainty, you know, that why doesn't the world see it the way I see it? It's so obvious. It's got to be this way. Well, you're demonstrating an attachment to the results. That's what the Bhagavad Gita is talking about. Yes, we need to be concerned about results. Of course, Prabhupada was very results-oriented. Right? But you're not Krishna. You don't know everything, and the fact is that even though it may seem impossible to you right now, maybe this other person has something worthwhile to say. So you don't just listen, you actually seriously consider what they have to say. Whoa. That's a big one. Because why? Because it means that there's a possibility that you have to take a step down and allow someone else to go first. One of the... One of the characteristics of us old-timers, the first generation, is that we had to own the table. The whole table was ours. That was our mood. We're in charge. We're the one. We know. They don't know. We know. Right? Sound familiar? All right. What we're learning in our doddering old age is that it's a great privilege to have a seat at that table. You don't have to own the table. Appreciate that you're being asked to sit down and be a voice among many. So whether that's in the interfaith arena, or whether that's on a temple board, or whatever it may be, it's a privilege to be involved with devotional activity. So some appreciation for that. and a willingness to accept. Prabhupada would do this. Prabhupada knew what he wanted to do, but he would ask us our opinion. He did this all the time. All right, here's your first Prabhupada story. It's in Geneva, and Prabhupada loved speaking engagements. He would speak. One day, he had started early in the morning, get up 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, start translating, then go for his morning walk, then give the morning class, and then receive people and get his massage, and then he would receive guests, and then he'd go out for programs. And at one point, it was in the evening, I said, Prabhupada, do you realize that you've been preaching now for 18 hours? He looked at me and went, Hare Krishna. He lived for that. I asked him, when are you going to retire? I was a little impertinent in my questions, but he always took them seriously. I said, when are you going to retire? He said, my job is to go, and they like it when I visit the temples. I said, yeah, well, we like it as well when you come out with a new book, so if you're retired, maybe you'd write more. He said, no, it's my job. I've got to go push. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? So he says it's difficult to travel, but my knees hurt, he says, when I take an airplane, but I don't talk about it. So we were going to go to the World Health Organization. Now the World WHO is responsible for population control, and they advocate family planning and so on. So he said, Yogeshwar, I have a concern. He says, what do you think? My concern is that they will take a picture of me when I go there, and they'll say, this Swami supports birth control and abortion. And the World Health Organization is a division of the UN. I don't think that they would stoop to that kind. I said, I don't know what life was like in India, but here, that would be undignified, and it's not. They don't need that kind of publicity. They don't need your endorsement. All right, then let's go. He would ask our opinion sometimes, even though he knew perfectly well what he wanted to do. But he was trying to get us to exercise some initiative. He wanted us to do something, right? So your willingness to allow other people to exercise some initiative is your contribution to cooperation. Don't be so concerned that something accumulates to your credit. You know what your credit is? Your credit is when you help somebody else get the credit. Here's your next Prabhupada story. I was sitting in the new Mayapur farm in his room helping him pack up. He was leaving 75, 76. And he was sitting on his cushion behind his desk chanting on his beads. And he's watching me pack his bag. He says, Yogeshwar, if you do something, it is no credit to you. I'm sorry, Prabhupada, I don't know what that means. He said, yeah, if you do something, it's no credit. Your credit is when you train somebody else to do it. Don't be hungry for recognition. That's a real Achilles heel in devotional service, is if you're the one who's got to get the recognition. Be anxious to help other people. Prabhupada would push us forward, So the next step in cooperation is you've got a lot of growing up to do. You've got some serious growing up to do to become mature enough to step back away from your own need for recognition. Okay, so there are a few things here involved in cooperation. One, you're not your body. You don't have to worry that someone's going to hurt you. No one's going to hurt you. Krishna is looking out for you. Your spiritual master is looking out for you. And you're invulnerable anyway. Two, you don't have to own the table. Just be appreciative to sit at the table, right? And listen. And three, if there's an opportunity, let someone else take the credit. You don't have to take the credit. Let's get real, okay? There are a lot of people out there with broken hearts. We've made a lot of mistakes in the past, and there are a lot of people with broken hearts. They deserve to be heard. We have some, damage control that we have to do here. We have to bring people back in. They have to be made to feel welcome. No judging of, past histories. Probably, if one person would leave devotional life, Prabhupada would cry and say, I couldn't save the soul. He has such, compassion for us. Okay, I've talked enough. Any questions? Anything you'd like to say or ask about? Or? Please say your name so I can get to know you a little better.
My name is Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. My question doesn't have to do with your topic tonight, but I've been thinking about this for most of my life, and I'd like to hear your elaboration on it. In the light of Torah, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Rachel, and Laban, they talk about the house deities. Could you elaborate in the light of that, and also in the light of the deities here for me? Can you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it's more than a question. It's like a PhD for
Excuse me. Yeah.
Actually, you should probably rephrase that in a way that I can handle. That's a very big topic. Is what's behind the question? Is there a particular thought or incident or something that's prompting you to ask the question?
How about if I give you my email address, and when you have time, you can do
I'm
that?
happy to have a communication with you. Sure, you bet.
Okay.
Come up afterwards, I'll give you my card and we can exchange.
You got it. Thank you. Thank you for talking to tonight.
Well, you're very welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for a very challenging question. Anyone else with a question that I can answer while I'm here this year?
Hare Krishna. My question is about...
What's your name, please?
My name is Sudhir.
Sudhir. Hare Krishna.
My question is about the one interesting point that you mentioned is the example of the lady who was tortured by the Nazi people. You made an interesting statement saying that if these persons can be on that platform, what about us devotees? So I was thinking, compared to those people, we have been given the association, the resources in the form of books and all. But what is that still prevents us, in spite of having all of these resources? Is there anything that those people who don't have all of these resources, they were able to be on that platform, but whereas me, myself, in spite of having all of the resources, still struggling to be on that platform?
All right. I'll answer your question, but it may not be what you were expecting. Part of the sign that you're advancing in Krishna consciousness is a willingness to accept that other people have their covenant with God just as we have our covenant with God. That we do not have an exclusive handle on truth. Prabhupada would always say that the absolute truth is there in all religions of the world. It wasn't just, placating people. It wasn't PR, propaganda. In our early stages, we're all in the early stages of devotional life, we tend to be a little bit more holier than thou. That we have the truth, we have Krishna. Any questions? God is on our team. So it's difficult sometimes to accept that somebody from some other tradition who may not have Prabhupada's books, who may not have the temples and the deity worship and so on, that they can progress so far that they become spiritually very elevated. So I have a question to ask. Who's the better devotee? Someone who has received formal Diksha initiation, strict vegetarian, chanting 16 rounds, but they're cold to other people, they're not particularly concerned with other people's well-being, they're indifferent to being a part of the community, but they're initiated and they're chanting their rounds, and they're vegetarian. Or someone who may never have heard about Krishna and Vrindavan, but they've surrendered their life to God, and their entire life is about serving God and wanting to extend compassion to people less fortunate themselves and bring them to God. And everything about them is completely unselfish. Who's the better devotee?
The second.
Who's to say? Who's to say? The point being that don't judge. Don't judge. We're not here to judge. We're here to serve. Yeah? The person delivering the mail to your door 15 years from now might be your children's spiritual master. How do you know? We don't know anything. You know the story of Jad Bharat? Here's a king who, Bharat is a king, and he decides the time has come to give myself to Krishna consciousness. So he goes to the forest and he begins his meditations, and from across the river a deer is being chased by a tiger. So the deer tries to jump across the river, and she's pregnant, miscarries. The mother deer dies. Bharat goes into the river, retrieves the child, the baby deer, comes back and makes the baby deer his pet. So he's trying to meditate, but as always thinking of me, he's become very fond of this little deer. So one day the deer wanders off, and Jadabha says, look, where did she go? And he goes up the mountain, he trips over a rock, falls down, hits his head, and dies. In his next life, he becomes a deer, because he was thinking about a deer. Yam yam vabi smaram bhavam chachachiyante kalevaram. So in that deer life, he's remembering his previous life as King Bharat. In the forest, he meets sages, eats some of the remnants of their prasadam. In his next life is born again as a human, and is remembering all these previous lives. So he becomes very grave, realizing how serious it is. So he's sitting by the side of the road, not saying a word. Children come by, they see that he's not doing anything, so they urinate on him, they make fun of him, they throw rocks at him. He does nothing. King comes by, being borne on a palanquin by 4 servants. One of the servants sprains his ankle. The king says, see that beggar over there by the side of the road? Go get him to take your place. So as they're going, the king is deriding Bharat, saying, you're filthy, you don't do anything, you don't even talk, your life is useless. So Bharat stops, and he turns around, and he says, Your Majesty, in this life, you're the king, and I'm carrying you. Who's to say that in our next life, I will be the king, and you will be carrying me? And the king realizes this is not a stupid beggar, this is a great soul here, right? So it's a good story to remember. Don't judge anybody. You have no idea what their story. The Native Americans say, don't judge a man unless you've walked a mile in their what? In their moccasins. Until you know someone else's story, how can you assess their situation? We're here to serve. That's all, not judge. Okay? All right, yes.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. My name is Himangi Devidasi.
Haribol.
Nice to see you after 13 years. I had met you the first time during the first mediation seminar we did in New Jersey with Mother Krishna Leela.
Oh, fantastic. Wow, you were there?
Yeah, I was there.
Wasn't that wonderful?
It was fantastic.
She's so good. She was just my guest speaker at Jiva Mukti Yoga School
Oh.
2 weeks ago in New York.
So I was.
She's still wonderful.
She's still wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
She was here maybe a couple of weeks back. So,
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
So it's very nice to see you again. I was
Thank you, you too.
looking forward for your association. My question is, you were talking about vulnerability, because we don't have this understanding that we are not this body, we are the soul. And even before coming to Krishna consciousness, we have certain experiences which forms our perception, because how we interact, the interactions we have had, like how you were saying, children whose parents are there to take care of their fears and protect them and help them deal with those fears, that many times many children don't have that opportunity. That kind of leads to certain perceptions a child develops growing up about world and about people and who they can trust, who they cannot trust. So when they come into Krishna consciousness, they carry that baggage with them. And it kind of almost like, even though everyone, we are not pure devotees, at least most of us here, we are trying to serve and trying to do what you said, listen, don't try to be in the forefront, cooperate. But somehow we are not able to trust because of these perceptions we carry. So how do you transcend those perceptions? So we can, I'm talking about when you're in a stuck position.
Yeah.
So how can you move from that stuck position to...
Yeah, how do you get out of that stuck place? Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, you're actually demonstrating the answer. Acknowledging that we are susceptible to these things is the first stage. You don't need to know how to get out of anything. That will be provided to you. That will be given to you. We actually don't advance in Krishna consciousness. Advancement is given to us when we are worthy of it. So you don't need to worry that somehow you have to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. See, the downside of the traditional schools of psychoanalysis and therapy is that they don't recognize, it's like science in a way. There's an unspoken rule that we will only work within the closed system of the individual. Any appeal to outside authorities, beyond the family and the immediate significant others, is not healthy for that process of freeing the self from its various prisons. So that's where we start with that. That's our starting point. So in that sense, therapy can take us to a certain place. But beyond that, as devotees, we have to be able to do the work ourselves. But it begins with acknowledging that we are the product of our upbringing. Another mistake of the first generation, I have to write this down for when I get to Alachua. Another mistake we made was, now we're spiritual. Now we know everything, right? Now we don't have any hang-ups anymore, we don't have any family anymore. Now we're just with Krishna, We're free. I don't think so. Yeah, just because you worship the deity, that means your psychic background has now automatically disappeared. All of your neuroses have evaporated. You're totally self-realized? Nah. We're complex creatures. We still carry around that baggage, which is the right word for it. Here's an example. Let's say that you grew up. I've been to several therapists over the years, right? One absolutely brilliant woman, she's passed away now. I don't think it was because of me, but she's gone now. Martha Friedman. And she wrote a little book called Overcoming the Fear of Success. Now, when you hear that title, you kind of do a double take. Wait a minute, people aren't afraid of success, they're afraid of failure. Let's take an example, and you can apply this to devotional life as well. Let's say, she told me about one client of hers who wanted to go back and finish her college education, and somehow she could never finish. She could never finish her course of study. In the therapy with Martha, it came out that this woman, when she was younger, had a younger sister who wasn't as good a student as she was. So she was getting failing grades or low grades, and the older sister was getting all A's and passing with flying colors. And the parents, bless their heart, in front of their daughters would say, well, at least one of our children turned out okay. All right, so that got buried in this woman's psyche, so that later when she wanted to finish her college degree, what was happening was that she was sabotaging herself, because the question that she was asking unconsciously was, why do I want to do this? I'm going to hurt my younger sister. So because she did not want to hurt her younger sister, she created those impediments to finishing her college degree. Or another example would be if you have, let's say your father was stoic and never gave you the acknowledgement and the reinforcement and the encouragement that you deserved. So let's say you would come home from school with having done really good in sports or having gotten an A on a test or whatever, and you'd show the results to your father and he would not say a word. He'd be indifferent to you, wouldn't acknowledge you. Well, if you're not getting the attention from your parents that you want by succeeding, how do you get attention? And maybe that behavior carries on into adult life so that you feel the only way you can get attention from people is by being a failure. See? So these things are stuck way back in early childhood experiences, but they influence our behavior now. Or another example would be if you're the child of alcoholic parents, but this is textbook. Very often a child will say, or a young adult will say, if I was a better child, they wouldn't have to drink so much. So you take the blame for their alcoholism. Right? And on and on and on and on. You can, plug your own story into this. Or if you're not married yet, and you say, subconsciously, unconsciously, you're saying to yourself, I'll never get married. Why? Because if someone actually got to know me, they'd know that I'm stupid and I'm not a nice person. So anytime you meet somebody, you've already decided it's not going to work. So you look for excuses to break up. Right? So we're susceptible to those kinds of behavior patterns. For devotees, we're not exempt from that. We're still products also of our upbringing and our histories. And in devotional life, we may be creating those same kinds of impediments. Right? I know, but look, I've been around long enough. I've seen a lot of devotees who are so insecure about themselves that they make life miserable for everybody else. So to be self-aware, someone could say, well, does that mean if I want to be a good devotee, I should go see a shrink? No, I don't think it has to go quite that far. But I do believe that to progress in spiritual life means to become aware of the factors leading to how we behave. We are self-reflective. We're introspective in that way. And we strive to do better. A devotee is someone who's always striving to do better, which means if you're going to do better, you have to understand what is it that's stopping you from doing better. So this kind of an excursion into selfhood, I think, is very important. What's our time like, Nityananda Pran Prabhu? Should we keep going? Do we have time still?
After you.
Okay.
We can.
Yes? No, and your servant.
Hare Krishna Yogeshwar Prabhu, thank you so much. My name is Subal Das. I also met you a long time ago in Brooklyn and New Jersey.
Good to see you.
Glad to see you. I appreciated very much the presentation. And my question is in regard of the practical application of cooperation. And one point that you made that is very important, that we try not to bring our own sort of glass or something to make judgments. Try not to be judgmental in terms of someone else's differences, way of seeing in a different way. The practical application of two things. One is sometimes there's a need to draw a line in terms of where the cooperation, where is the space in which things are going to cooperate. The cooperation have to happen. If that's how you get to know where there's no possibility of cooperation, or how to induce cooperation, that type of thing that always becomes difficult when you have some administrative or managerial type of service.
No, it's very good. Very, very good. Very good question. It's not Krishna conscious to prolong the agony. That's just stupid. I mean, if you're in an environment where, people just are entrenched and they're dug in and there's no way that you're going to move them, why fight that? That's like somebody in an abusive relationship saying, "No, Krishna, I'm here because you wanted me here. I deserve this, or maybe I can turn this person around if I'm a good partner to this person." No. If you're in an abusive relationship, get out. That's not being submissive or devotional. That's being self-destructive. So there's a part of us that has to be extremely realistic here. Obviously, if someone's beyond reach, don't try to reach them. But how do you know? Now, it's said of the Goswamis, Dira Dira Janapriyo Priyakaro, that they were loved by the ruffians and by the pious. Everybody loved them. If you reach a point in your devotional life where you are so exemplary, you can turn that energy around, even in the most contentious of situations. If you're good, if you're pure, and that means that someone looking at you, looking at them, see nothing but love. Then it's possible. You can turn that around, but don't pretend. Don't pretend to be that advanced, because you're just going to make things worse. So we have to be able to recognize what our limitations are, as well as our possibilities and potentials. It's very hard. You're asking a very, very good question. If this was a corporation or a business environment where people were getting salaries, then we can hold them accountable for their job description. Look, you were brought on to do these things, right? If you can't do it, we're going to have to let you go. Straight up. It's just business, right? We're in a somewhat different position here, Nityananda Pran and I were talking, just become a temple president, just be prepared for the worst, just brace yourself, it's going to be a real roller coaster ride. Because you depend on people's discretionary time, discretionary monies, on their willingness to set aside other things that they might like to do for themselves in order to come and render some service, as we call it, in the temple, right? And So how to get them to do that? You know, how to, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying how do we get the team together that we need to get things done, in essence. Am I correct? Okay. People go away for different reasons. People go away for different reasons. They go away because they're bored. If things aren't exciting, they don't stay. People go away if they think they're not appreciated. People go away. It's politically correct to say that someone goes away because of sex. Why is it politically correct? Well, because you can understand. They couldn't hack the celibacy, so they left. But that's just the bare surface of things. That's a shallow understanding of what goes on in someone's mind and heart. If people don't feel the greater intimacy of the community around them, then the physical intimacy becomes greatly exaggerated, and people go to that in order to compensate for the love and the intimacy that they're not feeling here where they should find it. If you have the love of your God brothers and God sisters and your temple community, that people will stay. They're not going to go away, and they'll try. They'll try as best they can to be a part of that, because that's what life's all for. Life is for relationships. That's all that life is. Life is all about relationships. Nobody enjoys in a vacuum. You can't enjoy your life isolated from the rest of the world. There's no enjoyment in that. There may be some relief to get away from all these people. You know, who needs them? But there's no joy in it. Right? Joy comes in the company of others. So if you're making an environment where people are feeling that, where they're feeling loved and they're feeling the camaraderie and the closeness, and we call it sangha, of devotees around them. For example, when was the last time anybody here, and you don't have to raise your hand, just picked up the phone and called a friend, not because you had some business to do, but just because they're your friend? You know the really important stuff? Like how to be a good friend, how to be a good partner, how to be a good parent, all the stuff they never teach you. Right? Extend yourself to somebody. Don't be selfish. Don't call someone because they have something that you want. It's not a good reason to call somebody. Call them because you love them. Call them because you want to know, how are you? Hey, I haven't spoken to you in a long time. What's going on? How's life treating you? How's your Krishna consciousness? Be a friend. Be a family member, If you do that, you won't even need grand plans for reaching out and getting personnel and internships, and they'll come. Everybody wants that. Everybody. I don't care who they are. Everybody wants a loving situation. So create that. Do that. And watch the magic happen. If it's for me, I'm not here.
My question is a little similar to Subal Prabhu's question. I don't want to walk out of the room with an understanding or a misunderstanding that cooperation, that considering others could be right and I could be wrong, which is well taken, and actually I appreciate that very much. Since you've been a temple president in the past and you have more experience than I do, as part of being the analogy of a team, let's say, being the captain of a team, when the captain of the team is interested in the team playing together for a common or shared goal, And sometimes it is the captain's responsibility, while he or she will hear and acknowledge that, yeah, someone can be right. In fact, maybe they are right. But for, let's say, the greater good of the team or whatever, has to take decisions such that either are unpopular or the person who may be right may not make that play. I'm asking because I'm dealing with a situation like that. And it is easy to see it as, oh, non-cooperation. Or is easy to see it as something that's weakening. Is it? And if so, how can some things be corrected? If not, what's the right perspective to see it in? Or do I need to go to a therapist?
If someone's going to leave, they're going to leave. And there's not much you can do about it. What you can do is acknowledge them and say, okay, I understand that you need this thing. Is there some way that I can help you have it? Now, you may not like the fact that maybe they're abandoning their service and they're leaving you holding the stick, and you've got to go running around now trying to figure something out. But they're gone anyway. Why not at least make that cordial and friendly and facilitate them? We're here to serve people not as we want them to be served, but as they need to be served. And if you do that, do you not think that somewhere down the line they might say, you know, I did him wrong, but he was always a gentleman. And not only that, he actually helped me. I want to come back to that. You don't know. And you can't do it because you expect that to happen. That's not selfless, that's motivated service. And devotional service is ahoituki apritiyata. You cannot do it because of some goal, some result that you want to achieve. If people are determined to do something anyway, then, you know, acknowledge your limitations, that there's nothing you can do about it, and serve them. Serve them as best you can. And say, listen, what about if you want to do that, would you allow me to offer you some space to do that? And if you're here, we can bring you lunch, you can have prasadam and see the deities. And all of a sudden, from this potentially tense adversarial situation, you're creating something that is cooperative to the extent that it can be cooperative. And then in time, maybe things can change. If you just, well then, goodbye, and you hang up the phone, you know, where's there room for reconciling there? There's no place, there's no ground to grow. So, but your situation is a little unusual. You're the main man. You know, the buck stops here. You're the guy, and so that's different. That, you know, you have what Thomas Aquinas once described as a secundum quid. You have a second tier of responsibility that other people who are not the temple president do not have. So you're in a somewhat different position because you're responsible for things going on in a certain way. So that has to be taken into consideration. It's like Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. You know, you can't ask of Arjuna to be cooperative when all that the Kauravas want is to fight and kill them. War was inevitable, you know. So it's a unique situation there. But we have to try. We have to try. And if anything, it's an impetus for our own prayers to Krishna. It's an opportunity to pray even more sincerely. I don't know what to do. I wish to serve you. You kindly intervene here. Please help me Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. That's japa. That's some real japa right there. You know, when it's from that place where you're feeling totally lost, without any recourse, now you're beginning to chant Hare Krishna. Now the chanting can begin. And from that place, that unleashes all kinds of amazing, miraculous stuff comes from it. Amazing things. That place. Things that seem absolutely unreconcilable get reconciled. Things that appear absolutely impossible become possible. Situations that seem utterly irreversible get reversed. I've seen it happen. We've all seen it happen. That's the magical, mystical part of Krishna consciousness. You know, it's Draupadi throwing up her hands. You know, now it's up to you, Krishna. I mean, whatever result you want. But don't get attached to it turning out the way you want it to turn out. Don't do that. Then it spoils the whole, that's the sand in the sweet rice. Just spoil the whole thing. Don't do that. Don't keep in the back of your head attachment to that idea that it's got to be the way I want it, otherwise it's no good. That you can't do. It's very hard. That's a very, very hard thing to do. Because you know as well as I do, sitting here, just as we're talking together right now, we know you're right. And they're not. We know it. It's obvious to anybody with any sense in their head. It's obvious. But Krishna consciousness is not about logic and reason and what makes sense. It's logical, it's reasonable, but the heart of Krishna consciousness is prapadyante. Just however, thy will be done. However you want it to happen, that's how it should happen. And I'm just going to try my best to serve you. Now we can talk about, Dan, is it Dan? Yeah, now we can talk about, you know, the trials of Job, and if you want to get into the biblical stories, it's all about this. Jonah in the belly of the whale. Right? The sacrifice of Abraham. It's all about this. Thy will be done. I am not in control. I am not in charge here. I wish to be your humble servant. I wish to serve you. Very difficult thing. To really do that, to really chant Hare Krishna like that, whew, that's very, very high level of realization. We're still trying to chant Hare Krishna. We're not there yet. So, but it's miraculous. It's absolutely miraculous. You're looking at situation. Everyone in this room, you can plug in your own story here. We're all looking at a situation where we're thinking, now what? You know, what am I going to do with this? Right? Everybody here, you all have a story. And don't pretend that you don't. And you're all thinking, I don't know what to do. No. So practice what you've been learning. You know, go deeper inside your sadhana. Go deeper inside your chanting. Try it just as an experiment. Couldn't hurt, might help. Now that may not be the, you know, ABCD plan for getting where you want to go that you might have liked. But I don't think that that's what Krishna consciousness is all about. I just don't. We have to try our best. And then accept that results are not in our hands. They're just not in our hands. Very difficult. Which is, my God, is what makes Prabhupada such a miracle. How did he do what he did? You know, I've researched this biography that you mentioned. It's coming out in April. It's called Swami in a Strange Land. That's the name of this biography. And I've had a chance to like rediscover Srila Prabhupada by doing the research on this book. When Leela Amrita was written, it was 2 years after he passed away. Since then, there's 40 years of research, you know, memoirs, uncovering more documents, research, theses, all kinds of things. And I benefited, in my research from all of that other work that's there. What did I discover writing this book? I don't think I actually appreciated the extent, the depth of the sacrifices that he made, or the hardened steel of his conviction. He went through circumstances a lesser person would have turned away from God long ago. Long ago. He never lost his certitude for a second, no matter how bad. He went through such hell. People stealing his Bhagavad Gita manuscript, no money, nothing. All he had was two tattered dhotis, nothing. He's crying. My spiritual masters told me I have to go to the West. I have to make the world Krishna conscious. He has nothing. Nobody knows him. He's got no contacts, no money. His business fails. League of Devotees the building gets taken away from him. Nothing. He didn't diminish his faith by one iota, not once. My spiritual master wanted this, he would not have asked if it wasn't going to happen. And he would talk like that to people. He'd say, in India, before he left for the West, he would tell people, there are temples, there are books, there are temples, there's thousands of people chanting. Really? Now? Well, time only, But before he came to the West, he was talking like that. There's thousands of temples, millions of. His conviction was so strong. Amazing. Amazing. All right. Ajita Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. In the car we spoke a little bit about this. How do you see, what do you think would be the ideal future of ISKCON? And what could we do now? What are some practical steps that we can take now to make that future happen?
Okay. I get this question a lot, and I love this question. Right. What is an ideal future of Krishna consciousness? We have representatives in every field of human endeavor. Business, industry, government organization, conflict resolution, poverty alleviation, environment, climate change, the rights of women and children and underrepresented minorities. We have people in government, people in law, everywhere. And they may not necessarily be the decision makers, but they could be advisors to decision makers. And that means knowing the language and the issues of each of those different spheres of activity. And what's the first step for getting there now? Pay attention to your own community. Get to know the people Krishna has already sent you. What do you know about the people in this room? Do you know anything about the people in this room? Do you know who they are, what they do, who their families are, what the challenges are in their life? Get to know them better. When you can recognize that Krishna has already given you everything you need, then you earn the privilege of having more. Hare Krishna. It's all there. It's all there in front of us. What we need is some inspiration to make the most of it. It's the purloined letter. You know the purloined letter? You're looking for evidence of something. It's a short story by Edgar Allan Poe that the letter that was needed, I think to exonerate him from something, I don't remember, was sitting right there in the desk. But sometimes the thing that is most obvious is the thing you cannot see. Krishna has given us everything we need here. What an amazing... I wish I had a group like this when I had give classes up at Jiva Mukti Yoga. I'd be a happy guy. You've got so much here. You have to maximize it. It means go real deep inside your community. Get to know people much better, you know. Visit them, find out who they are. Look, everybody here knows better than you do what they can do to serve the temple community. You don't have to tell them or ask them to do something. They already know. Our job is to give facility for people to render service. So I would do a population survey, a community survey. I'd get to know the community better. I'd ask for opinions, ideas. What do you think of the temple? Be open to criticism. Be open to people saying, I've never appreciated the fact that when I walk in, the first thing I see is a sea of shoes. You know, like why do people coming in the temple have to see shoes? I'm making this up. I don't know whether you... Ask questions. See what people say.
Hare Krishna, I am Bhargavi.
Say again?
Bhargavi.
Bhargari.
Bhargavi.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. In the lecture, we finally spoke about do not take credits. Do not take credits. There is nothing, when you do something, you get credited. You get credited only when you make something that someone is getting credited, when you help someone. So, then what is the motivation? To please the Lord, to please the devotees, to please the Vaishnavas? Can we feel happy at least at that time? And one more thing is, when someone praises us, what should be our reaction? They are praising for something you did. What should be our reaction? We should take it or not?
Well, I'll answer that one first. Say thank you. Someone says something nice to you, just be polite, you know. Oh, thank you. That's not so hard. You know. So far as the first one is concerned, look, Prabhupada used to say, there was a reporter asked Prabhupada, what's the purpose of life? He said, to enjoy. You're either enjoying materially or you're enjoying spiritually, but the purpose of life is to have fun. It's to enjoy, right? That's our nature. The nature of the soul is we are joyful creatures. We're parts and parcel of Kishore Kishore. Look how joyful. Yeah? The question is then, what's the greatest joy? The greatest joy, at least that I've known, is when someone needs something to advance spiritually or to move forward, to progress in their life, and if I can be of some service to them. I don't think I've ever known greater joy than that myself. So that's not very difficult to understand. You have to remember also, I don't know about you, I joined Krishna consciousness, I was already 19 years old. There wasn't too much this world had to offer that I hadn't experienced already, you know. So it's like, nah, I don't want to go back to that. You know, Krishna consciousness kind of spoils you. Your material interests kind of go, but, you know, again, that? Nah, I don't know. So the problem comes when you're in between. You don't want to go back to the material world, but you haven't yet experienced that spiritual joy that is sufficient to keep you happy. So you're kind of teetering back and forth, you know, in that middle ground between not being so stupid that you're going to be a karmi enjoyer anymore, but you're not so spiritually advanced that you can just be full with love for Krishna. Right? That's where most of us are. We're in that middle space there. So you have to be realistic, you know, about where you're at. Know yourself well enough to know what you need. And and be forgiving. Guilt is a terrible thing. Guilt is toxic. Guilt is like anger. It gets in your blood. So don't live with guilt. If you're not, a self-realized, soul, it's okay. It's all right. We got a long way to go still. So be patient, and accept it. Okay, I still got this attachment or that attachment, whatever. But don't live with the guilt of all of that. Strive to do better. Keep good company. And if you see someone whom you can reach out to, that's a joyful thing. Because then that's the person who's going to come to you afterwards and say, "Oh, thank you very much for helping me." And you can say, "You're welcome." That shouldn't be too difficult. Krishna consciousness is not meant to be some mind-blowing, gut-rending, excursion into the depths of pain and, that's not Krishna consciousness, It should be fun, You should be having a good time. So go have some fun in Krishna consciousness. Go find your friends. Down in Alachua, they do all kinds of crazy stuff. My son is in a band because he likes to play rock and roll. Yeah, okay. All right, is it devotional? You don't want to do it on the altar, no, but it's, we're human, right? Okay.
On the same point, you were asking.
What's your name, please?
Sorry. I'm Sthira Devidasi. On the same point, you were telling not to look for recognition, but then work towards others getting recognition. So, to me, it's difficult because I feel I'm always looking for recognition. So, how to move from A to B is the question.
Well, it's hard for me to answer that because you're looking at a guy who's gotten a lot of recognition. I've had a lot of ego stroking in my life. I've spoken at the Pentagon, I've been on television, I've worked with celebrities, I've gotten a lot of that kind of stuff. So it's kind of out of my system now. Do something that's worth recognition. You want recognition, do something recognizable. Do something that's a substantial service and that people will say, "Did you see what she did? Oh my Krishna." Then you'll get the recognition you want and people will be happy because you did something wonderful. Don't fight it. If you want it, go for it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
But then that's not devotional service, right?
Well, it's not maybe perfect devotional service. Don't set the bar so high that you can't possibly achieve it. Don't do that. Be honest about where we are now. Prabhupada didn't ask us to pretend to be Goswamis and Goswaminis and just be honest. Live your life to the best of your ability, following the principles of Krishna consciousness. Everything will come in time. You don't have to force it. It's because you're sincere, that you want to know how to reconcile these things, right? People, we want to give devotees the benefit of the doubt, that they have these issues because they're trying to be sincere. They want to be sincere devotees. But what they're unable to recognize is that don't be a great devotee. Just be a good devotee. Do what you can. Don't you do more than that is dangerous. You have to recognize what your limitations are and where you are. And then you can be happy. Yeah, I'm like that, okay, whatever, and go on with your service. It doesn't have to be so existential, It gets that way because, Prabhupada was coming back from a morning walk in Los Angeles, and he walked up the steps, and there was one young woman there, just crying and crying, "Oh, Prabhupada, I'm just so fallen, I love Krishna." He patted her on the head and said, "Stop living with guilt. Just go on with your service. We're not meant to live with guilt. Right. Okay, I'm not perfect. I'm still attracted in this way, or I have those bad habits. Go on. Now go on. It's good to have a friend also to confide in. Do you have a good friend? Oh, then you're lucky. If you have a good friend, someone you can talk to and say, "Hey, I'm having a little problem with this. What do you think?" Talk it out. Problem is when you keep it inside and you don't talk about it and you don't expose it. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about when people have these doubts or these desires or these attachments or insecurities about themselves, and they don't feel safe talking about it. Then it becomes, a clique and a division and a schism and this and that and the other thing. If they felt comfortable, if people are feeling they can trust this environment, enough to talk about what's going on, you're home free. Everything will come from that. Create an environment where people are feeling that they can trust you. And how do you start that? It's with you. Don't wait for them. You're the one. You've got to go to them and say, "I'd like to be your friend. How are you doing in Krishna consciousness? I see you around the temple. I see you on Sundays. I don't really know you. I thought I'd come over and introduce myself. Here's who I am. This is what I do. Tell me about you. Tell me about your life." Make friends, When was the last time you did that? When was the last time you made a new friend in Krishna consciousness? That's what it's all about. You're going to be fine. Any other questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. My name is Mathuresh Das. And actually, I do not have a question for you. I just want to say it was such an eye-opening presentation, wonderful. And I don't know, everybody probably has enjoyed it as much as I have, and I have learned so much. Thank you so much. I couldn't just keep quiet. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay, are you ready? You're welcome. That was easy. Yeah. One or two more? Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Shivram, and thank you for the nice, I attended just the question and answer, but I really took a lot from it. Something that is coming to my mind is would you be able to say something about loving oneself in terms of Krishna consciousness?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a psychology major?
No.
That's a very good question. I don't think you can love somebody else until you've learned to love yourself first. I don't think it's possible. I don't think you can step so far outside of your own insecurities and self-doubts and self-recriminations that you can actually love somebody else. I don't think it can be done. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen love extended by someone who was not very self-assured. Now, self-assurance is different from ego and pride. That's a very different thing. Self-assured means firm in the philosophy. Really, really fine question. Very fine question. Self-love in its pure sense, in its true sense, is at the root of devotional life, because it means you have such strength of conviction that this philosophy is true, that it means that I must be a spark of God. I must be a part and parcel of Krishna. And if that's the case, then I guess I'm okay. With that sense of self-assurance, not ego, but self-assurance, you can then set your own interests aside long enough to listen to somebody else. Okay? You can't be a good listener if you're always thinking about what's in it for me. Then you're being constantly distracted by that. How can you be totally present for another person? Only if you're so confident about your situation that you're being taken care of, Krishna and your spiritual master are looking out for you, that you can set all of your own interests aside and just be there for that person. It's the only way. So that's what it means to understand I am not the body. That's why I keep coming back to this one lesson, this fundamental lesson. That's why it's at the head of the Bhagavad Gita. That's why it's in chapter 2. If you understand that, boy, that'll save a relationship. That'll save a couple from getting divorced. It'll save parents and children from becoming so antithetical and bitter that they'll separate and not talk to each other. That'll reconcile someone in their job situation where they think, I can't be here, I'm going to quit, I can't stand these people. It'll smooth that. There isn't any situation where that kind of self-assurance cannot act as a healing balm. Very good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
My name is TJ.
What's going on?
You mentioned that there's representatives in areas such as the environment and global warming. You had said climate change. And there's some popularity gaining way among the environmental community that the leading cause of climate change is the slaughterhouse factory industry with regards to cows, which also includes the dairy industry. And in this age that we're living in, the atrocious acts committed against cows that produces dairy, how are we to understand the great use of dairy products in temple worship and prasadam preparation? Thank you.
Well, you're conflating a few different issues there. We started off talking about climate change, and now we're talking about the use of dairy in temple diet?
Right. The fact that the meat and dairy industry is the leading cause, some people say, of climate change, and that there's representatives within that arena.
No, I understand your question. There are gradually temples, ISKCON temples are going over to what is called ahimsa milk, where cows do not emit the same degree of methane because they're cared for. You know, if an animal is cared for, its biochemistry changes. And so, for example, at the Eco Village outside Chowpatty, temple there, all of the milk that's used in the Chowpatty temple comes from cows who are treated like royalty. You would be happy to be treated like these cows are being treated. They were literally worshipped. They're so happy and so content. And they do not pollute the environment. They're totally antiseptic, and so that's different.
What you're talking about is this mass industry of animal slaughter, which creates even more emissions, carbon emissions, and deleterious effect on the environment than all of the transportation industry sections combined. All the cars and buses and trains and everything else put together in the whole world do not generate as much destructive chemistry into the environment as what you're rightly describing in the food industry. So I had a very revealing conversation with Gary Hirschberg, who's the founder of Stonyfield Farms, you know, the dairy company. They do organic yogurts and so on. And I asked him, what is your strategy for getting the dairy industry to reform its ways? I wanted to see where he was going to go with this. And he said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, you know, from my training, my background, there's a need to bring people around to understanding that there's a kind of a sacred relationship between people and the environment, people and nature, people and the planet. Because without that, we're just going to continue exploiting nature. And he took exception. He said, you know, we don't have time for that. Sure, would I like to convince people that, you know, we're part of this one great unity of all things? Yeah, fine, but frankly, I don't have time for that. My job is to convince companies that they're going to earn more money going green. That is financially beneficial to them if they use less plastic in their containers, if they use this, that, and the other thing. Okay, I was really disappointed with that answer. Because if all that you do is try to reform the dairy industry or transportation or whatever it may be, energy, by convincing people that there's money to be made in alternative energy or in going green or whatever, that's not a solution. That's a Band-Aid. They may go along with it as long as they make money with it, but at a certain point, when that's no longer financially viable for them, they'll just find some other way to pollute the environment. It doesn't change people's hearts. So along with these compelling arguments that it's financially, economically beneficial to go green, you'll be able to get more for less investment, etc., whatever, as Vaishnavas, I think we're compelled to add this other element, which is you cannot ignore the nature of life itself. You can't just go on the strength. After the malfeasances of 2000, you know, the Arthur Andersen and the Enron fiascos and all that stuff, there was a series of legislations enacted called Sarbanes-Oxley. Sarbanes-Oxley was intended to regulate the behavior of business by making companies more accountable, more transparent, more regulated, greater oversight, etc., etc. Didn't do a thing. Look at 2008. All over again. What it did was made a lot of lawyers very rich because corporate CEOs used the law to circumvent all these new legislations, just made them more cunning about how to get around the legislations. You cannot legislate a change of heart. It doesn't work. The answer is you become pure. You become a devotee. You become someone who, by your life's example, compel others to rethink their own way of being in the world. That's useful. That's powerful. That's permanent. That can establish long-term change. Otherwise, any solution is going to be stopgap. Without addressing the issue of consciousness, the issue of life, no solution to any problem in the world is going to last long-term. Just won't last. People will find some other way to go about the same old business again and again and again. So Krishna consciousness is the only solution, whether it's to environment or whether it's to whatever. So you're not asking me, do I think temples should go vegan? You didn't ask me that. That's a different question altogether. And you and I can talk about that later on our own. We'll have that conversation between us, okay? So I've used your question to kind of go a little bit larger. Right? I think your question is, how do temples rationalize using milk products?
How to understand it, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, the answer is that change takes time. Change is happening in ISKCON. Temples may not be going completely vegan, but they're going ahimsa. They're becoming more conscientious about where they buy produce. These things are happening. It's gradual, but it's happening. That's the short form.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, are we done here? What do you think? Any other questions? Otherwise, last question? Huh? It's okay with me. I'm here. Put me to work.
Hare Krishna. I'm Chaitanya Priyadas. I have a question that in day-to-day life, suppose we have a dispute with some person, and the relationship went so far that it cannot be resolved. And then all of a sudden, that person again, we encounter the same person. So from a Krishna conscious point of view, how should we behave so that he can advance and at the same time I can advance?
Well, it's a very general question. It's a very, very broad question. I think as a general rule, without knowing the specifics, I don't know if are you married? No, all right, so it's not about your wife. Okay. Trying to figure out where you're going with this, I don't know. All right, I'll tell you about my wife. My wife's not a devotee. She's not even vegetarian. And for the longest time, I was really angry at myself. How did I get into this? All that stuff. Right? And then, so we were like this close from breaking up. And then I was saying, God, Prabhupada, what do you want? What should I do? I went to a really, really deep meditation, really deep. And I realized he wants me to fix this. He wants me to be an example. He wants me to make this work. Okay. So I went back to her and I said, okay, I want to understand. Please help me to understand. I'm the world's biggest idiot. Why exactly? What is it that I'm not doing? And after a lot of serious discussion, and me setting aside all of my bitterness over my choices, and I deserve this, and blah, 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 just listening, comes back to listening, I realized, oh my gosh, she's afraid of Krishna. She's afraid that the one thing, Krishna is the one thing that could take me away from her. And it forced me to revisit my behavior, and I realized, wow, I've been doing a lot of devotional service, and I haven't been spending enough time at home. I've been so busy trying to be a good devotee that I forgot I'm also a husband and a father. So it meant making some really difficult changes. I had to set aside going to temple as often as I used to go. It meant making certain adjustments to the way we were living and so on. Over the course of several years, I'm proud to say I've earned her trust. She didn't trust me before, and I didn't trust her, and now we trust each other. And 3 weeks ago, we celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary. So I don't know any other way to answer your question than that. Just listen and ask, beg for help. Say, what can I do? Okay? All right. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.